You are standing in the year 2039, looking up at the night sky. The stars are not where they should be. One constellation, Virgo, seems to hum with a strange light, and you feel a deep, ancient vibration in the air, as if a cosmic string, stretched for millennia, is about to snap. But to understand that moment, we must go back to a silence that was sealed in iron and buried for 1,000 years. The story begins with a discovery, not in a grand tomb or a king's treasure vault, but in the forgotten dirt beneath a ruined French chapel. They found a disc of dark metal, cold to the touch, its face locked by 6 interlocking arms. But one of them, the 6th, was broken. It was a flaw in a perfect design, a prophecy of an imperfection yet to come. This was no simple relic. It was a map of the heavens, a clock counting down to a moment when the stars themselves would form a sentence. A secret, a forgotten order died not just to protect, but to keep silent. They called it the last sigil, and its silence has just been broken. Welcome back. Tonight, we will trace the edges of that broken sigil together. So before we begin, take a quiet moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you feel a connection to the stories we share here. Feel free to leave your city and the time on your clock in the comments. I read every single one. Now dim the lights. Let the world outside fade away. And let's journey back to the moment it all began. The air down here is cool and heavy, smelling of damp earth and something else, something ancient and mineral, like crushed stone and forgotten time. You feel it on your skin, a cellar chill that has nothing to do with the summer sun warming the fields of Languedoc above. For weeks, this is where you have spent your days, inside the shallow pit dug within the ruins of a forgotten chapel near Bézieux. Your world has shrunk to these crumbling stone walls, to the patient scrape of your trowel against layers of history. You are an archaeologist, a historian, but today you feel more like a monk, devoted to a silent, sacred text written in soil and clay. You are 20 feet down, a depth that has taken you past the debris of recent centuries, through the hard-packed floor of the medieval church, and into the gritty, pale layer of Roman lime that served as its foundation. This is where the official records end. The Knights Templar built their small chapel, the Commandery of Lepech, on top of older Roman ruins, a common practice. Historians agree on this. It was a minor outpost, strategically placed but unremarkable, lost to history after the order's violent suppression in the early 14th century. But you've always felt there was more to the story. The local legends, the whispers that never made it into the academic journals, spoke of this place not as a fortress, but as a vault, a place where something was kept. Your trowel scrapes against something that isn't stone. It's a sound you know intimately, yet this one is different. Not the dull thud of rock or the brittle crack of pottery, but a clean, resonant clink, a note of pure metal, ringing for a fraction of a second in the dense silence before being swallowed by the earth. You pause, your breath held. Your heart, which had been beating in a slow, steady rhythm, gives a single, sharp thump against your ribs. You put the trowel aside, your movements suddenly deliberate, reverent. You switch to a brush, and then to your bare hands, feeling the fine, cool grit under your fingernails. The earth gives way slowly, as if reluctant to reveal its secret. First, you uncover a curved edge of dark, pitted iron. Then another. It is a circle, perfectly round. As you clear more soil, you realize it's not a shield or a helmet, but a case. a flat, disc-shaped container no wider than a dinner plate. It is heavy, far heavier than it looks, and cold with a deep, profound cold that seems to draw the warmth from your fingertips. 6 metallic bands, like the powerful arms of a strange sea creature, are folded across its face. They spiral inward from the edge, meeting at a central hub where they seem to merge, becoming one. It is not a lock that can be picked, or a lid that can be pried. It is a piece of seamless, impossible geometry, a puzzle that holds itself shut by its own perfect, unbroken logic. You run your thumb over the surface. It is surprisingly smooth beneath the centuries of grime. There is no keyhole, no hinge, no seam. You think of the popular, almost fringe theories that historians so often dismiss. The idea that the Templars were not just soldiers and bankers, but guardians of an esoteric knowledge, a sacred technology inherited from sources lost to time. Some manuscripts describe strange devices, objects of celestial harmony or alchemical power. Most scholars call these descriptions allegory, metaphors for spiritual enlightenment. But as you look at the object in your hands, a shiver of doubt, cold and sharp, runs through you. This does not feel like a metaphor. It feels like a machine. Lifting it carefully from its earthen bed, you turn it over in your hands. The weight is substantial, a solid declaration of its own reality. You try to trace the path of the 6 interlocking arms to understand how they might open, but they do not move. They are as fixed and eternal as the stars. Then, your finger catches on something, a flaw. One of the 6 arms near the outer edge is different. It is not a smooth, continuous band like the others. There is a fracture, a clean, deliberate break in the metal, as if a single note in a perfect chord had been silenced. The break is ancient, its edges worn smooth by time, yet it feels like a wound, a deliberate imperfection in an otherwise flawless design. The 6th arm is broken, and in that moment the silence of the pit changes. It is no longer the empty, peaceful silence of the deep earth. It is a held breath, a waiting. The air grows thick with a sudden, palpable tension, as if your touch, your discovery, has awakened not just an object, but a presence. The disc in your hand seems to hum, a vibration so faint it is more a feeling in the bones of your hands than a sound in your ears. It is the whisper of a story that has waited 1,000 years to be told. A story that begins not with a word, but with a broken piece of iron and a silence that is about to end. You rise slowly from the pit, the iron disc held carefully in both hands. Its weight feels like an anchor, grounding you in this specific moment, while your mind reels with the implications of what you found. As you emerge into the open air, the familiar ruins of the chapel surround you, but they look different now. The crumbling walls, the sun-bleached stones, the lonely archway that frames a perfect slice of the blue French sky. They are no longer just the remnants of a building. They are the outer shell of the secret you now hold. This is the chapel that forgot the sky, and you are beginning to understand why. Its formal name was the Commandery of Le Pech, a modest Templar outpost established in the 12th century. The historical records are sparse. It was one of hundreds of such properties the Knights Templar owned throughout Europe, a network that formed the backbone of their immense wealth and power. Officially, its purpose was agricultural and administrative, a place to manage the order's local landholdings. But standing here with the strange, cold weight of the disc in your hands, the official story feels thin, like a veil thrown over something much deeper. The chapel is small, barely large enough for a dozen men to stand shoulder to shoulder. It was never a fortress meant to withstand a siege. It was built for another purpose, for watching or for waiting. You walk towards the one remaining wall of the apse, the semicircular recess where the altar once stood. This is where you found the disc, buried deep behind it. You run your hand over the stones. They are local limestone, weathered and porous, but the mortar holding them is unusually dense. You remember chipping away at it, how it resisted your tools with a stubbornness that felt almost deliberate. It contained not just sand and lime, but also powdered brick and charcoal, a Roman technique known as opus signinum. It was a method for waterproofing, used for cisterns and aqueducts. Why would they use a waterproofing compound to build an altar wall, unless they weren't trying to keep water out? Perhaps they were trying to seal something in, to keep it dry, to keep it safe, to keep it silent. Historians still debate the true nature of the Templars' esoteric beliefs. After their brutal suppression starting on Friday, October 13, 1307, their enemies, led by King Philip IV of France, accused them of all manner of heresies, spitting on the cross, worshipping a severed head known as Baphomet, practicing dark rituals. Most modern scholars dismiss these charges as propaganda, fabricated to justify the seizure of the order's vast wealth. But what if the accusations were a distorted reflection of a genuine secret? Not a demonic cult, but a sacred science, a knowledge of geometry, astronomy, and mechanics that the medieval world would have seen as magic, a knowledge that might produce an object like the one you are holding. You look up at the sky through the missing roof. The chapel was built to align perfectly east-west, a standard feature of Christian churches. But there are anomalies here. A narrow slit of a window, high on the southern wall, seems oddly placed. It doesn't align with the sunrise on any significant holy day. A colleague once suggested in a half-joking email that it might align with a specific star, perhaps one in the constellation Virgo, on a date of obscure importance. At the time, you dismissed it as fanciful speculation. Now you are not so sure? The chapel, you realize, was not built to look at the sky in general. It was built to look at something specific, a single point in the heavens. It didn't forget the sky. It ignored all of it, but one small, secret part. The silence here is profound. It's a silence you've grown used to over the weeks of your dig, broken only by the wind, sighing through the wild grasses, and the distant buzz of a tractor in a nearby field. But now, that silence feels different. It feels curated, maintained. You think of the men who lived here, knights, sergeants, a chaplain. They were warriors of God, yet they lived in this secluded place, far from the battlefields of the Holy Land. What did they do here, day after day? Did they pray, or did they listen? Did they stand in this very spot, looking at the same patch of sky, waiting for a sign? You imagine them performing their rites, not with chants and incense, but with quiet observation. Their rituals guided by the slow turning of the stars, a ritual without sound, dedicated to protecting a silence. The silence of the object buried beneath their altar, the silence of a broken promise, a broken arm on a celestial lock, the silence you have just shattered. Back in the quiet solitude of your small field office, a rented room in a nearby farmhouse that smells of old wood and lavender, you place the disc on a clean, soft cloth. The afternoon sun streams through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, each one a tiny world drifting in the light. Away from the raw earth of the dig site, the object seems even more alien, a piece of a different reality dropped into this rustic pastoral scene. You sit before it, not as an archaeologist cataloging a find, but as a supplicant before a silent oracle. The world outside, with its gentle breezes and distant church bells, fades away. There is only you, this room, and the fractured secret on the table. You begin to examine it with the focused precision of your profession. You use a soft bristled brush to gently clean the remaining dirt from its intricate surfaces. The metal is a deep, dark gray, almost black, and it seems to drink the light rather than reflect it. It is likely an iron alloy, but one of unusual density. You make a note to have a small sample analyzed, though you feel a strange reluctance to mar its surface. The 5 unbroken arms are magnificent, a testament to a lost art of metallurgy. They spiral inward with a geometric perfection that is breathtaking. Each curve is flawless, each line precise. It's a design that feels both organic, like the unfurling of a fern, and yet rigorously mathematical, like a diagram of a complex cosmic equation. You compare it to known Templar symbols. The most famous is the seal of 2 knights sharing a single horse, representing their initial vow of poverty. Another is the Agnus Dei, the Lamb of God, a common Christian motif. Their battle flag, the Bosant, was a simple black and white banner. All of these are symbols of faith, of piety, of a militant Christian order. This disc is none of those things. There are no crosses, no lambs, no swords. Its language is one of pure geometry. It speaks of orbits, of forces, of a system. It reminds you more of an astrolabe or an intricate clock face than a religious icon. It feels less like an object of worship and more like an instrument of calculation. Your attention is drawn again and again to the break, to the 6th arm. Under a magnifying glass, the fracture tells a story. It is not a recent break caused by a clumsy shovel or the shifting of the earth. The edges are worn smooth, patinated with the same dark finish as the rest of the disc. The break is as ancient as the object itself, but it's not the result of a flaw in the casting or a slow degradation over time. You see faint stress marks in the metal, indicating that the arm was bent, deliberately, until it snapped. It was an act of intentional violence, an act of symbolic execution. Why would someone create such a perfect, beautiful object only to break it? It feels like a sacrilege, a deliberate silencing. You think of the fringe theories about sacred geometry, the belief held by ancient architects and alchemists that certain shapes and proportions could channel divine or cosmic energy. A perfect geometric form was a conduit to a higher reality. To break that form was to sever the connection, to shut the gate. Was that the purpose here? To disable the device? To render the key useless? You close your eyes and try to imagine the scene. A stone room, lit by torches. The air is thick with the smell of incense and ozone. A man in a white mantle with a red cross holds the disc. His face is grim, his jaw set. He is not destroying a treasure. He is performing a necessary, painful duty. He places one end of the disc on an anvil, takes a hammer, and with a single, sharp blow, he breaks the 6th arm. The sound echoes in the chamber, a sound of finality, a promise being sealed, a cycle being interrupted. The perfect song of the 6 arms is now a broken melody. A faint hum seems to emanate from the disc, a low thrum of energy that you feel in your teeth. It's the same vibration you felt in the pit, but stronger now, more insistent. It seems to be coming from the fracture itself, as if the brokenness is not an absence, but a source, a wound that leaks a strange, silent energy into the room. You realize with a sudden, chilling certainty that you have been looking at it all wrong. The 5 perfect arms are the context, but the broken 6th arm is the message. The sigil is not just a lock, it's a story. And the most important part of the story is the part that is missing. The silence where a note should be. The empty space in the sky where a star has gone dark. Of course. Let's continue the journey. You let out a breath you didn't realize you were holding, and the spell of the broken arm is momentarily broken. You decide to approach the disc with a fresh perspective, not as a symbolic lock, but simply as an artifact. You set up a raking light, positioning a lamp so its beam shines almost horizontally across the disc's surface. It's a simple technique used to reveal subtle textures, inscriptions, or tooling marks that are invisible in direct light. The room darkens as you switch off the main overhead light, and the disc transforms. Under the sharp, angled beam, the smooth, dark metal becomes a landscape of shallow hills and valleys, and it is in this landscape of light and shadow that you see them. At first, you think it's just another trick of the light, a flaw in the ancient metal. On the outer rim of the disc, just inside the point where the 6 arms begin their inward spiral, there is a tiny mark. It is no larger than a pinprick, a minute notch that you had completely missed before. You lean closer, your nose almost touching the cold metal. It is not a random scratch or a pit of corrosion. It is a perfect V-shaped groove, cut with intention and incredible precision. You run the tip of your finger over it. It's barely there, a ghost of a mark. Then, as you slowly rotate the disc under the light, you find another, and another. They are not evenly spaced. They follow a complex, irregular pattern that seems to have no logic. Some are clustered together, a tight grouping of tiny cuts, like a line of cryptic Morse code. Others are separated by wide, smooth spaces of unmarked metal. There are dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, encircling the entire circumference of the disc. This is a new layer of the puzzle, a language written in millimeters. This isn't decoration. This is data. Your mind immediately jumps to the Antikythera mechanism, that famous and baffling discovery from a Roman-era shipwreck. A device of bronze gears and dials of such complexity that it was more than 1,000 years ahead of its time. An analog computer designed to predict eclipses and astronomical positions. Historians consider it a singular anomaly, a fluke of genius. But as you look at the disc, you wonder if it was truly so unique, or if other similar devices were simply better hidden. Your heart begins to beat faster. You turn to your laptop, the modern world of digital archives clashing with the ancient object on your table. You pull up a set of ephemerides, astronomical tables that list the calculated positions of celestial objects at regular intervals. You start with the most famous medieval set, the Alphonsine Tables, compiled in Toledo in the 13th century, a monumental work that was the standard in Europe for over 300 years. You cross-reference the positions of the major stars and planets, trying to find a correlation, a pattern that matches the strange rhythm of the notches on the disc. For hours, you find nothing. The patterns are close, but they never quite align. It's like trying to fit the wrong key into a complex lock. Frustration begins to set in. The room is now completely dark, save for the glow of your laptop screen and the single sharp beam of the lamp on the disk. The air is still. You are about to give up for the night when a thought strikes you. The Alphonsine tables were a product of their time, a brilliant but ultimately flawed system based on the Ptolemaic model of the universe, with the Earth at the center. What if the disk was based on an older, or perhaps a different, system of knowledge? The Templars had extensive contact with the Arab world, which had preserved and advanced the astronomical knowledge of the ancient Greeks, Persians, and Indians. On a hunch, you search for more obscure, pre-Ptolemaic star charts, fragments of Babylonian ephemerides, and ancient Egyptian celestial maps. It is a deep dive into the esoteric history of astronomy, the kind of research that borders on speculation. And then you find it. In a digitized manuscript from a forgotten corner of the Vatican library, you find a chart that maps the sky not as it is, but as it was believed to be, by a fringe Gnostic sect from the early first millennium, a sect that believed the heavens were a great machine, and that the fate of the world was tied to the slow, grinding alignment of its gears. Your hands tremble as you align the chart with a high-resolution photo you took of the disk. It's a match. The notches are not random. Each tiny cut corresponds to a specific celestial event as described in this obscure text: the rising of a particular star, the conjunction of two planets, the furthest point of a planetary orbit. The disk is a calendar. An incredibly complex nonlinear calendar that tracks not days or years, but vast cycles of cosmic time. The notches are like nightfall, each one marking the end of one small celestial day and the beginning of another. The disk was not just pointing to a place in the sky, it was pointing to moments in time, and the sequence, you realize with a dawning sense of awe and dread, was designed to be read in a circle, leading to a final, ultimate calculation. A calculation that was deliberately, violently interrupted by the breaking of the sixth arm. Of course, here is the discovery hangs in the silent room, as real and as heavy as the iron disk itself, a calendar of the heavens, a map of time. The faint hum you thought you felt before seems to pulse with a new rhythmic intensity. It is the sound of a machine that has been switched on. Your fatigue vanishes, replaced by a feverish, obsessive energy. You have to follow the path. You have to read the sentence the stars have written. Starting with the first notch, a mark corresponding to a planetary alignment in the late 3rd century, according to the Gnostic chart, you begin to trace the sequence. Your finger becomes the stylus, the disk, the tablet. You move from one tiny groove to the next, your laptop screen beside you displaying the strange, forgotten map of the cosmos. The pattern is hypnotic. A conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. Click. A transit of Venus. Click. The slow generational drift of the constellations as they wheel through the great cycle of precession, the 25,800-year period known to ancient astronomers as the Great Year. Each notch is a footstep on a vast circular road through time. You feel a strange sense of vertigo, as if you are not just reading a chart, but traveling through the centuries, watching empires rise and fall from a silent, celestial vantage point. This is not the astronomy of Newton or Kepler. This is something older, more mystical. The Gnostic sect that created this chart believed the material world was a flawed creation, a prison constructed by a lesser, ignorant God. But they also believed that the heavens, for all their seeming perfection, contained flaws in their design, cracks, seams in the fabric of reality. And they believed that when the planets and stars moved into certain, exceptionally rare alignments, these cracks would momentarily open. They were not just predicting eclipses, they were predicting opportunities, windows of escape, or perhaps moments of profound revelation, when the true nature of the cosmos was laid bare. You trace the pattern through the fall of Rome, through the Dark Ages, through the rise of Charlemagne. The notches are clustered tightly here, a flurry of celestial activity. You can almost feel the tension of the men who made this, their obsessive, centuries-long watch. Did the Templars truly understand the Gnostic heresy they had inherited? Historians have long debated the extent of the order's unorthodox beliefs. Some argue they were devout, if secretive, Christians. Others insist they were the keepers of a dangerous pre-Christian wisdom, a prisca theologia, gathered from the mystics and philosophers they met in the Holy Land. Looking at this disc, you feel the answer is somewhere in between. They may not have worshipped the Gnostic true God, but they clearly revered the machine of the heavens and the power hidden in its calculations. The pattern continues, moving past the year 1307, the date of the order's destruction. The notches become more widely spaced now, the celestial rhythm slowing down. The disk is tracking a calmer, quieter sky. You follow the path through the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, the Industrial Revolution. The world changes, but the silent cosmic clockwork turns, indifferent. Your finger moves across the smooth, cold iron, and you feel a growing sense of anticipation, a knot tightening in your stomach. The path is nearing its end. It is approaching the break. The final section of the disc, the part that falls under the shadow of the sixth broken arm. There are only a few notches left. You check the alignments. A planetary grouping in the 1880s. A specific stellar position in 1945. A near-perfect conjunction in the late 1990s. And then, there is one final mark. It sits right at the edge of the fracture, the last word before the sentence is cut off. You carefully input the corresponding celestial coordinates into your software. You triple-check the data from the Gnostic chart. The software whirs, calculates, and a date appears on your screen. It is not a date in the past. It is a date in the future. The year is 2039. A chill, colder than the iron of the disk, washes over you. This is not a historical record. It is a countdown, a prophecy with a destination. The disk was not created to commemorate a past event, but to anticipate a future one. The Templars who guarded this object were not looking back at a golden age. They were looking forward to a specific, calculated moment. The moment when the planets and stars would once again trace that ancient, potent pattern in the sky. The moment the final gear in the great machine would click into place. And it was this moment, this final calculation, that the breaking of the sixth arm was designed to obscure, to silence. But the calculation is still there. The year is still waiting. The clock has been ticking, silently, in the dark, all along. The year 2039 hangs in the air, a date that transforms the disk from a historical artifact into a living prophecy. It is one thing to uncover the secrets of the past, to trace the faint outlines of forgotten beliefs. It is another thing entirely to find the past staring back at you, pointing to a moment in your own future. You feel a profound shift in your role. You are no longer just an observer. You are now a custodian of this knowledge, a witness to a countdown that began over 1,000 years ago. Your gaze moves from your laptop screen back to the disk and then to the specific celestial chart for the revealed year. You focus the software on the predicted alignment. The Gnostic map of the heavens for 2039 resolves on the screen. The planets are arranged in a rare and elegant pattern, a grand procession across the ecliptic. But your attention and the focus of the entire ancient mechanism is drawn to one specific region of the sky, the constellation Virgo. Here, several planets have gathered, forming a tight, unusual cluster. It is not just a random grouping. Seen from the perspective of the ancient chart, the celestial bodies form a distinct shape. It is a shape that mirrors, with breathtaking precision, the 5 unbroken arms of the sigil on the disk itself. A wave of vertigo washes over you. This is the sentence the stars were meant to write, the final, triumphant chord in a symphony composed across millennia. The disk is not just a map of the heavens. It is a map for the heavens, a key designed to resonate with a specific celestial lock. The ancient Gnostics who first charted this path believed that such alignments were not merely symbolic. They were moments when the very structure of reality became malleable. They subscribed to a concept that modern historians might call astrotheology, the belief that the universe is a conscious entity and that its physical arrangement has a direct, tangible influence on the Earth. The configuration near Virgo in 2039, in their belief system, was the ultimate event, a moment of cosmic sympathy so powerful it could rewrite the laws of nature. You think of the endless debates among historians about the Templars and astrology. Were they practicing a forbidden art? The Church officially condemned astrology as a form of divination that denied free will. Yet, many medieval scholars, monks, and even popes privately consulted astrologers. It was a gray area, a science intertwined with mysticism. The Templars, with their vast network and access to Arabic and Jewish scholarship in the East, would have been exposed to the most sophisticated astronomical and astrological systems of the age. Perhaps for them, it was not a matter of fortune-telling. Perhaps they saw it as a higher form of physics, a way of understanding the forces that govern the world. The disk feels like the ultimate expression of that belief, not a tool to predict a king's fortune, but an instrument to pinpoint the moment the world itself would be changed. The shape in the stars near Virgo seems to hum. It is a feeling, an intuition, that resonates from the disk on your table. It is the shape of the prophecy. You imagine the Templar guardians of this secret, generations of them, performing their silent rituals in the chapel at Le Pec. They weren't just praying, they were listening. They were attuning themselves to the slow, deep music of the spheres, waiting for this one specific chord to resolve. They were the choir, and the sky was their cathedral. The prophecy was not written in a book, but in the slow, inexorable dance of the planets. But the celestial pattern is incomplete. It mirrors the 5 unbroken arms. But the place where the 6th should be, the position corresponding to the broken arm on the disk, is empty. It is a void in the heavens, a silent missing note in the cosmic song. The breaking of the arm was not just a symbolic act. You realize now it was a desperate attempt to create a sympathetic flaw in the celestial mechanism itself, to break the circuit, to prevent the final resonance from being achieved. The prophecy is there, written in the sky for anyone with the right map to see. but it is a prophecy that has been deliberately and violently sabotaged. The question that now fills the silent room is a terrifying one. What happens when a prophecy this powerful is not fulfilled, but broken? Of course. Your mind is a whirlwind of dates, stars, and silent prophecies. You feel the need to ground yourself, to return to the physical object in the table. The disk is not just a static map. You felt it from the beginning. The hum, the sense of a coiled energy waiting to be released. It is a machine. And machines are meant to move. You place your hands on it, your palms flat against the cool, dark iron. Your left hand rests on the central hub where the arms converge, and your right hand on the outer rim. You apply a gentle, steady pressure, attempting to turn the outer ring while holding the center still. For a moment, nothing happens. The disc feels like a single, solid piece of fused metal. You are about to give up, afraid of applying too much force and damaging the priceless artifact. But then, with a faint, deep groan, something gives. It is the sound of metal surfaces, perfectly machined and separated by only a molecule's width of air, sliding against each other for the first time in centuries. The outer ring begins to rotate. The movement is impossibly smooth, silent, and fluid. It feels like turning a dial suspended in oil, a piece of precision engineering that defies its 1,000-year slumber. As the outer ring turns, the 5 unbroken arms elegantly retract and extend, their geometry shifting in a complex hypnotic dance. It is beautiful, a mechanical ballet of celestial mechanics made manifest. You feel a surge of triumph. You have unlocked another of its secrets. This is how the calendar is used. You don't just read the notches. You turn the disk to align them, to bring different celestial cycles into focus, to perform calculations that are still beyond your comprehension. You think of the sketchbook of Villard de Honnecourt, a 13th century artist and engineer whose drawings included designs for complex automatons and even a perpetual motion machine. The knowledge to build such a device existed, however rare, a secret stream of mechanical genius flowing beneath the surface of the medieval world. You continue to turn the disk, watching the graceful dance of the unbroken arms. The motion is seamless, perfect. You can feel the faint, rhythmic clicks as hidden gears or pins engage and disengage within the mechanism. The soft hum intensifies, becoming a low, resonant tone that seems to fill the room. It is the sound of the machine singing its ancient song. You are completely mesmerized by the fluid, perfect motion. And then it happens. As the rotation brings the broken 6th arm to the top, the mechanism hitches. The smooth, silent glide is interrupted by a sudden, jarring stutter. There is a faint thump-scrape sound from within the disk, a noise of protest, of something catching where it should not. The fluid motion is broken. You stop, then try again, turning it back and forth over that one section. Every time, it is the same. The disk turns perfectly for about 300 degrees of its rotation, but as it passes the point of the broken arm, it skips. It stutters like a broken song, a vinyl record with a deep scratch that forces the needle to jump, repeating the same fractured note over and over again. A new, more profound chill settles over you. The break is not just a visual flaw, it is a mechanical one. The act of snapping the 6th arm didn't just deface the sigil, it crippled the machine. The prophecy is not only symbolically incomplete, it is mechanically inaccessible. The final calculations, the ultimate alignment that the year 2039 is supposed to represent, cannot be fully engaged on the disc. The path is blocked. The song cannot reach its conclusion. You sit back, the silence of the room now filled with the echo of that stutter, that skip. The disc has given you its greatest secret yet. The break is not just an event in the past, it is an active present-day impediment. The Templar who hammered this arm did not just kill the prophecy, he wounded it, leaving it alive but trapped in an endless, broken loop. The wheel turns, but it can no longer complete its journey. And the stutter, you realize, is not just a flaw, it is a clue. It is the sound of the silence itself, a rhythmic, repeating imperfection that is trying to tell you what was lost when the music stopped. Of course. Let us proceed. Here is the stuttering, skipping sound of the disc echoes in the quiet room long after you've stopped turning it. It's a sound that gets under your skin, a rhythmic imperfection that speaks more loudly than the silent, fluid motion of the other 5 arms. The prophecy is blocked, the final calculation mechanically impossible to reach. This realization shifts your focus. The astronomical puzzle of 2039 is only half of the story. The other half lies in that deliberate, repeating flaw. You turn away from the charts of the heavens and toward a different kind of map, the landscape of esoteric belief, numerology, and ritual. Your research takes you deep into the digital archives of monastic libraries and university collections. You are no longer looking for star charts, but for patterns of a different kind. You search for references to broken wheels, 6-armed symbols, and sacred numbers. You find yourself immersed in the world of Pythagorean and Gnostic numerology, a belief system where numbers were not just tools for counting, but were living principles, the divine architecture of reality itself. The number 6, representing harmony and balance. The number 7, representing perfection and completion. And the broken 6th, representing what? A deliberate imperfection, a chosen flaw. This fascination with numbers was a quiet undercurrent in the medieval world. While the church hierarchy focused on doctrine and scripture, many thinkers, artists, and architects were obsessed with sacred geometry. It's a subject historians still debate. Was this just a symbolic language for expressing faith, or was it a genuine belief that building a cathedral with specific, holy proportions could create a space that was literally closer to God? You think of the Templars, masters of logistics and international banking. Their success was built on a foundation of meticulous organization, of numbers, of ledgers and accounts. They were profoundly practical men. But perhaps their practicality was intertwined with a deep, mystical belief in the power of the numbers they managed. Perhaps their balance sheets and their cosmic calendars were 2 sides of the same coin. Your search leads you to an obscure number, 729. It appears in the margins of alchemical texts and in the footnotes of philosophical treatises. To the ancient Greeks, it was a number of profound significance. It is 3 raised to the 6th power. It is also the square of 27 and the cube of 9. It was a number that represented the intersection of the divine and the terrestrial, a number of cosmic cycles. And it is in connection with this number that you find him, a 12th century Benedictine monk named Eligius of Rheims. He was a contemporary of the early Templars, a reclusive scholar known for his attempts to synthesize Christian theology with Pythagorean number theory. In a digitized scroll containing his commentaries, you find a passage that makes the hair on your arms stand up. Eligius does not mention the Templars by name. He speaks only of a silent brotherhood, the Custodes Rotae Mutae, the guardians of the mute wheel. He writes of a great cosmic cycle, a period of 729 years, during which the heavens move towards a moment of perfect, resonant harmony. He calls this harmony the musica totalis, the total music. But he describes it not as a moment of divine revelation, but of catastrophic danger. A truth so pure and so absolute that the flawed vessel of the material world cannot contain it. According to Eligius, the guardians understood this. They knew that at the end of each 729-year cycle, the song of the heavens had to be deliberately interrupted. He describes a ritual passed down through generations. The guardians would take their wheel, a device of 6 arms representing the 6 parts of the harmony, and they would perform a sacrificium silentii, a sacrifice of silence. They would break one of the arms. This act, he writes, would not destroy the wheel, but reset it. It would introduce a flaw into the harmony, a dissonance that would echo for another 729 years, protecting the world from a truth it was not ready to hear. You sit back from your screen, your heart pounding. The broken arm was not a one-time act of sabotage. It was a ritual, a repeating, cyclical act of maintenance. The disc in front of you is just one iteration, one link in a very long chain. You do a quick calculation. If a cycle ended around the time the Templars were founded in the 12th century, the next cycle would end around now, in the early 21st century. The discovery of the disc in 2001 was not an accident. It was the cycle ending, the alarm clock going off. The silent choir of 729 was not a group of singers. It was the generations of guardians, a silent procession through history, each tasked with the same solemn duty, to wait for the end of the cycle, and then to break the wheel again. The stuttering you felt was the echo of that ancient ritual, a mechanical memory of the last sacrifice. The disc is not just counting down to a date in the future. It is telling you that a much older, much longer cycle has just come to its end. And this time, the guardians may no longer be there to perform their sacred, silent duty. The name Eligius of Rhymes becomes your new obsession. You feel an intellectual kinship with this reclusive 12th century monk who sat in his cold stone scriptorium, wrestling with the same concepts that now fill your small sunlit room. You move past his formal commentaries and begin to hunt for his more personal writings, letters, marginalia, the stray thoughts he might have jotted down when he believed no one else was looking. It is in the digital facsimile of a manuscript, tucked away in the final, unadorned pages after the main text concludes, that you find it. It is a colophon, a brief note by the scribe, but the handwriting is different. It is cramped, hurried, and deeply personal. It is the voice of Eligius himself, speaking across 9 centuries. His tone is no longer that of a detached scholar. It is the voice of a man who has seen something that has shaken him to his core. He writes not of theory, but of an event. He does not give a specific date, only referring to it as the year of the Second Crusade's return, which would place it around 1149. He describes being granted a rare audience with a group of white-mantled brothers at a secluded commandery, a description that sends a shiver down your spine. He was brought there, he writes, not to observe a mass, but to witness what they called the somnus rotae, the putting to sleep of the wheel. His description of the event is terrifying in its simplicity. He was led into a subterranean chamber, circular and bare, lit by a single brazier in the center. The air, he notes, was cold and carried the scent of ozone, like the air after a lightning strike. In the center of the room, resting on a stone anvil, was a disk of dark metal, glowing faintly in the firelight. 6 men stood around it, their faces hidden by the shadows of their hoods. They were silent. There was no chant, no prayer. There was only a profound, waiting stillness. One of the men, the leader, held a heavy, flat-faced hammer. Eligius writes that he did not witness a murder, but a death, the death of a harmony. The leader raised the hammer, and for a moment the firelight glinted off the 6 perfect, unbroken arms of the disk. Then, with a single, precise strike, he brought the hammer down. Eligius does not describe the sound as loud. He calls it a dull thud that was felt in the bones, more than heard with the ears. A sound of finality, a sound of severance. He saw the 6th arm of the disc snap, a clean, brutal fracture, and then he describes what happened next. Something more, as he puts it. As the arm broke, a wave of energy, visible only as a faint shimmer in the air, pulsed outward from the disc. The brazier flame leaped and turned blue for a heartbeat. A low groan echoed through the stone floor beneath his feet. And then came a silence so deep, so absolute, that Eligius felt as if he had gone deaf. He writes that the world did not end. It simply quieted. The fever of the cosmos, as he called it, had broken. The relentless, grinding music of the spheres had been muted. He describes the feeling not as one of loss, but of profound, unsettling relief. A merciful silence had fallen over the world. You sit back from your screen, the words of this long-dead monk painting a vivid, chilling picture in your mind. This is no allegory. This is an eyewitness account. Historians have long debated the true nature of the relationship between the Cistercian order, to which the powerful Templar patron Bernard of Clairvaux belonged, and the Benedictines like Eligius. Was there a secret, shared knowledge between these monastic orders? Eligius's testimony suggests a connection far deeper than most scholars imagine. He was not just a theorist, he was a sanctioned witness, brought in to record and legitimize the ritual. You look at the disc on your table, the broken arm, the clean fracture, the faint residual hum. It is no longer just an artifact. It is the physical evidence of the scene Eligius described. The very object from that subterranean chamber now sits in your room. The monk's final notes are not just a story. They are the provenance of the relic you hold. He recorded the death of the song, and you are holding its corpse. And his final scrawled sentence, written almost illegibly at the very bottom of the page, is a warning that freezes your blood. They have bought another cycle of peace. May God have mercy on those who are there when the silence breaks again. The monk Eligius's warning hangs in the quiet air of your room. May God have mercy on those who are there when the silence breaks again. His words create a bridge of ice across 9 centuries, connecting his time directly to yours. The 729-year cycle he described, the one that ended with the ritual breaking of the wheel, would have concluded its next turn in the very era you now inhabit. The thought is staggering. The breaking of the silence is not a future event to be predicted. It is a present reality to be understood. Your research pivots once more, away from the distant past and towards the immediate. You begin to search for echoes, for tremors, for any sign that someone else, somewhere in the modern world, felt the cycle turn. You comb through obscure academic forums, digital archives of esoteric societies, and the personal blogs of fringe historians. You are looking for a needle in a haystack the size of the internet. You search for phrases like the silent wheel, celestial harmony, and the broken six. Most of what you find is New Age speculation or poorly researched conspiracy theories. It is a frustrating, fruitless search, a descent into the noise of the modern world that feels a world away from the profound, curated silence of the Templar chapel. You are about to abandon this line of inquiry when you find him. His name is Jean-Pierre Moreau, a retired professor of medieval symbolism from the University of Toulouse. He was a respected, if somewhat eccentric, figure. He never achieved widespread fame, preferring to publish his work in small, independent journals rather than mainstream academic publications. He passed away in 2015, but a small historical society he belonged to has digitized and archived his personal papers, including his private journals. It is a gesture of respect for a beloved local scholar. You download the files, not expecting to find much. For days you read through Moreau's life. His notes are a blend of academic rigor and poetic intuition. He writes about the symbolism of the Rose and Gothic architecture, the numerology of cathedral floor plans, the subtle persistence of pre-Christian motifs in church carvings. He was a man deeply attuned to the whispers of the past, the hidden language of stone and glass. You feel a growing affinity for this quiet, observant scholar. He was, in his own way, a guardian of forgotten knowledge. You reach his journal entries for the year 2001, the year the disc was unearthed, though you know Moreau could not have known that. His entries for that year are different. His usually precise, analytical tone gives way to something more personal, more unsettled. He writes of a strange feeling of restlessness, a sense of anticipation he cannot name. He describes the silence in the old churches he visits as feeling thinner, less absolute. He feels, he writes, as if a great bell, silent for an age, has been struck, and we are living in the long, slow moment before the sound arrives. And then, in an entry dated late in the autumn of that year, you find the sentence, "It is not a conclusion to a grand theory. It is a simple, private observation, a thought jotted down at the end of a long day. It is a sentence that could only be understood by someone who had held the disc, who had felt it stutter, who knew the story of the broken arm." Moreau, who knew none of these things, wrote it as a pure, inexplicable intuition. He wrote, "The wheel is turning again." The words leap from the screen. It is not a metaphor, it is a diagnosis. This quiet, sensitive scholar, with no knowledge of the disc, of Eligius, or of the 729-year cycle, felt it. He felt the moment the great machine of the heavens completed its long, slow turn. He felt the silence break. His journal is not a footnote to your discovery. It is a corroborating testament from an independent witness. The prophecy was not reignited by the discovery of the disc. The prophecy was reignited by the turning of the cycle itself, and your discovery is merely the latest, most tangible consequence of that event. You look from the glowing words on your screen to the dark, silent disc on your table. The two objects, separated by a millennium of history and the randomness of discovery, are speaking the same language. One is a voice from the heart of the mechanism. the other a whisper from a sensitive soul standing on its distant shore. Both are telling you the same thing. The long peace bought by the last sacrifice is over. The mute wheel is no longer mute. It is turning. And it has been turning, silently, insistently, for years, pulling the world, and now you, toward the future it has waited so long to create. The realization that the wheel is turning settles over you, no longer as a theory, but as a fact. The quiet scholar Jean-Pierre Moreau felt it. The disc in front of you is the physical proof of it. A new, urgent question begins to form in your mind. A question that pushes aside the historical puzzles and celestial charts. If the cycle has turned, and the silence is breaking, who is listening now? The Templars are gone. Their white mantles turn to dust and legend. The Benedictine monk Eligius is a voice from a forgotten scroll, who, in this modern world of noise and distraction, has inherited their ancient, silent duty. You begin to see the world differently. The ordinary becomes suspect. You walk through the old cities of Europe, and you find yourself watching the watchers. The quiet man on a park bench who seems to be studying the patterns of migrating birds with unusual intensity. The librarian whose gaze lingers on a particular medieval manuscript a moment too long. The old horologist in a dusty shop surrounded by hundreds of ticking clocks, who seems to be listening not to their individual sounds, but to the great collective rhythm they create. You start to feel a presence in the periphery, a sense of being observed not by cameras or satellites, but by human eyes. Eyes that look for meaning in the spaces between things. The eyes between the minutes. Your research turns to the great, unsolved mystery of the Templars. What happened to their fleet and their portable archives on the eve of their arrest in 1307? History records that King Philip's men, in their coordinated dawn raid, found the order's coffers largely empty. The Templar fleet, moored at La Rochelle, had vanished into the Atlantic mist, never to be seen again. Historians debate where they went: to Scotland, to Portugal, to the Americas. But what if their most precious cargo was not gold, but knowledge? What if those ships carried away the last of the Guardians and their sacred charge, the wheels and the scrolls, dispersing them into a hidden diaspora? The organization could not survive in its old form. It had to dissolve, to become like water, seeping into the cracks of the world. The guardians of the mute wheel ceased to be an order and became a tradition, a whisper passed down through generations, not always from father to son, but from master to apprentice, from one sensitive soul to another. They would have no name, no headquarters, no formal membership. They would be a network of quiet watchers, connected by a shared secret and a shared sensitivity to the turning of the great wheel. They would be the silent watchers. You find scattered, oblique references to them in the footnotes of history. A 17th century letter from an astronomer in Prague mentions a society of silent philosophers who believed the stars were a form of divine clockwork. An 18th century Freemasonic text speaks of a hidden, higher degree, the keepers of the celestial balance. These are dismissed by mainstream historians as allegorical fantasies, but you now see them as faint footprints, the ghostly trail of a tradition that learned to survive by becoming almost invisible. They would be the ones to notice the thinning of the silence. They would be the ones who felt the cycle turn in 2001. And they would be the ones who would be watching for any sign that one of their lost relics had resurfaced. a cold dread begins to creep up your spine. The discovery of the disk was not just an academic breakthrough. It was a flare, fired into the deep darkness where these watchers live. By unearthing it, by awakening it, you have done more than solve a historical mystery. You have announced your presence on a stage you did not know existed. The hum of the disk, the prophecy of 2039, the story of the broken arm. These are no longer your private secrets. The silence you broke was also a signal, and somewhere out there, the eyes between the minutes have turned in your direction. You are no longer the one asking the questions. You have become the answer to someone else's. Of course. Let us continue the story. Here is: the feeling of being watched is not a physical sensation. There are no figures in long coats standing under streetlights, no unmarked cars parked outside the farmhouse. It is something far more subtle. It is the feeling of a conversation you have just missed, the sense that the book you just picked up in a dusty shop was put down by someone else only a moment before. It is an intellectual pressure, a sense that your own thoughts are no longer entirely your own, but are part of a silent, invisible dialogue. You have stumbled into a hidden ecosystem, and the native species are beginning to take notice of the intruder. As you delve deeper into the history of secret societies and esoteric orders, you realize the image you have in your head is wrong. You are not looking for knights or monks. The power of the silent watchers lies in the fact that they shed the very things that would make them identifiable. They have no rank, no robes, no sigils worn on their chests. They understood that the true path to survival was not to build stronger walls, but to have no walls at all. They are the university professor who specializes in forgotten languages, the quiet archivist who knows the secret histories of families, the artisan who restores ancient astronomical instruments. They are people who have chosen professions that allow them to listen to the past without drawing attention to themselves. You find a historical precedent for this in the concept of third orders. During the Middle Ages, many people wanted to live a life of spiritual devotion without retreating from the world into a monastery. Orders like the Franciscans and Dominicans created tertiaries, lay members who followed a modified version of the monastic rule, while continuing their secular lives as merchants, craftsmen, or scholars. It was a way to be both in the world and apart from it. Historians see this as a way for the church to extend its influence. But what if it was also a perfect model for a secret tradition to hide in plain sight? The Watchers are the ultimate third order, their devotion pledged not to a saint, but to a silence. Their work is not one of action, but of observation. They are drawn to the seams of the world, the moments when the veil between what is and what could be grows thin. They walk the shadows of eclipse and equinox. You imagine them, scattered across the globe, taking note of these celestial events, not with the scientific detachment of a modern astronomer, but with the holistic sensitivity of an ancient priest. They would observe the strange, sharpened shadows during a solar eclipse, the quality of the silence that falls as the birds stop singing. There's a long, almost forgotten history of this kind of observation. Pliny the Elder, the Roman naturalist, recorded the belief that earthquakes could be predicted by the unusual behavior of well water. The Watchers practice a far more sophisticated version of this, reading the subtle environmental and energetic shifts that occur during powerful astronomical alignments. This is how they would have felt the cycle turn in 2001. It would not have been a single, dramatic event. It would have been a cascade of tiny, almost imperceptible signs. A change in the resonant frequency of the Earth, a statistical anomaly in the decay of certain isotopes, a subtle shift in the tone of the world's background noise. They are the human instruments built to detect these changes, a network of sensitives who have trained themselves and been trained by their predecessors to notice what the rest of the world is too busy to hear. But how is the tradition passed on? This is the question that haunts you. Without a formal structure, how do they find new members? How do they ensure the knowledge survives? Perhaps it is not a conscious recruitment at all. Perhaps they simply recognize a shared nature in others. They would see a young historian, like you, whose research gravitates towards the esoteric. They would see an archaeologist, whose hands seem to be guided by intuition as much as by training. They would watch you from afar, observing your methods, your patience, your obsessive dedication. They would see that you are already, in spirit, one of them. And that is the most unsettling thought of all. As you trace their imagined footsteps, you realize you are walking a path that feels deeply, unnervingly familiar. Your long hours in the archives, your sensitivity to the hum of the disc, your intuitive leaps that connect a 12th century monk to a 21st century prophecy. Are these your methods, or are they theirs? You came to this story as a scholar, an outsider looking in. But the deeper you go, the more the line blurs. The disc did not just fall into your hands by chance. It found you because you were already listening. And the watchers are not just observing you, they are recognizing you, of course. You begin to think about the nature of ritual. Your mind conjures images of chanting monks, swinging censers filling a vaulted cathedral with smoke, the solemn intonation of Latin prayers. But the order you are tracing, the silent watchers, would have none of that. Theirs would be a ritual without sound, a practice defined not by what is said, but by what is heard in the spaces between words. It would be a ceremony of pure, focused listening, and its roots, you are certain, lie deep within the most secret practices of the Knights Templar. The official rule of the Templar Order, the guide for their daily life and spiritual duties, is a fascinating document. Much of it is standard monastic fare, rules for prayer, for eating, for the maintenance of equipment. But when it comes to the chapter meetings, where the true business of the order was conducted, the rule becomes stern and specific. These meetings were to be held in absolute secrecy. Guards were posted, and no brother, under penalty of being expelled from the order, was ever to speak of what was said or done within those closed chambers. Historians have long speculated about what occurred in these secret sessions. Was it merely administrative business, or was it something more? You imagine a different kind of meeting, not a council of war or a financial report, but a collective act of attunement. The knights would gather, not in a grand hall, but in a small, circular chapel, a shape the Templars favored, modeled on the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. Scholars still debate the full significance of this architectural choice. Was it simply an homage to the holiest site in Christendom, or was the circular design chosen for another reason? Perhaps for its acoustic properties. Perhaps a round room with a central point was the ideal chamber for a ritual of focused listening. The knights would enter in silence. There would be no sermon, no hymn. They would simply take their places, their breathing slow and measured, their bodies still. They would close their eyes. Their ritual was one of sensory deprivation, of shutting down the noise of the world to better hear a different frequency. They would focus on the feeling of the cold stone floor beneath them, on the subtle vibration of the earth itself. There is a persistent, if unproven, theory that the Templars, like the cathedral builders of their age, were masters of geomancy, the ancient art of placing structures on sites of powerful telluric energy, or ley lines. Their ritual would be an act of connecting with this energy, of feeling the slow, deep pulse of the planet. And at the center of the circle, on a stone pedestal, would be the disc, the mute wheel. It would be their tuning fork. They would not need to touch it. They would simply attune themselves to its presence, to the faint, resonant hum that you yourself have felt. They would listen for its song, the perfect, harmonious chord of the 5 unbroken arms. And they would listen, most intently, for the silence, the stutter, the deliberate repeating flaw of the broken 6th arm. This was the key to their practice. They were not listening for a voice from God. They were listening for the echo of the sacrifice. They were calibrating their own senses against the memory of that sacred, violent act, ensuring that the silence it purchased was still holding fast. This was their true purpose. Not to conquer lands or amass wealth, but to serve as a collective sensory organ for the world, a human network dedicated to monitoring the celestial balance. The modern watchers would have inherited this practice. They might not gather in stone chapels anymore. They might perform the ritual alone in their quiet studies, in remote observatories, or simply by pausing for a moment on a crowded city street. But at specific, coordinated times, during an equinox, a solstice, a significant planetary alignment, they would all, in their own way, fall silent. They would breathe. They would listen. They would feel for the hum, for the stutter, for the integrity of the great silence. You look at the disc on your table. It is not just a key or a map. It is a ritual instrument. It is the central node in a network that spans a millennium. And you realize, with a sense of awe that borders on fear, that you've done more than just find it. You have activated it. The faint hum it emits is stronger now because it has found a new listener. It has found you. The ritual is not just something you study. It is something you are now a part of. The silence in your room is no longer empty. It is charged with the attention of the disc, and through it, with the latent attention of the watchers themselves. They are not just watching you. They are listening to you listen. Of course. Let us continue. Here is, your understanding of the disc has been built on a foundation of Western history. Templars, Benedictine monks, French chapels. But the Templars were not an isolated phenomenon. They were a bridge. For 2 centuries they lived and fought in the Holy Land, at the crossroads of empires and ideas. They were in constant contact with the Byzantine world, with the great intellectual centers of Islam, with the merchants who plied the Silk Road. You begin to wonder, is the philosophy of the mute wheel, the secret of the broken arm, truly a European invention? Or is it a European translation of a much older, more universal idea? You cast your research net wider into the deep oceans of Eastern mythology and mysticism. You explore the intricate cosmology of the Persian Zoroastrians, the subtle metaphysics of the Sufi masters, the vast cyclical worldview of Hindu scriptures. You are searching for echoes, for parallel structures, a celestial machine, a necessary flaw, a silent brotherhood. And in the fragmented texts of a half-forgotten Manichaean sect, originating in Persia in the 3rd century, you find it. And it is centered around a stark, powerful symbol, the black sun. Mainstream history remembers Manichaeism as a major rival to early Christianity, a dualistic religion that saw the world as a battlefield between a good, spiritual world of light and an evil, material world of darkness. But this sect's writings describe a more complex, unsettling cosmology. They believed that the material world was indeed a prison, but that the greatest danger was not darkness, but a perfect, sterile light, a state of absolute, unchanging perfection that would bring all of existence to a static, meaningless end. Their God of light, they wrote, was sans dens, Westertine, was a flawless tyrant. To prevent this ultimate stagnation, a wound was introduced into the heart of creation at the very beginning. This wound was the black sun, not a son of evil, but a son of potential, a hidden engine of change that exists only in the absence of perfection. It is a void, a gravitational point of pure silence, around which the noisy, imperfect universe must endlessly turn. The black sun is the necessary flaw that makes growth, choice, and even time itself possible. It is the stutter in the song of creation. The parallels are so striking they make you dizzy. The sect spoke of guardians of the shadow, not as warriors, but as poets and astronomers whose sacred duty was to chart the movements of the heavens to ensure the wound remained open. They had a ritual object, not a wheel, but a loom of stars, a celestial map woven with threads of silver and shadow. And once every few centuries, when the celestial pattern threatened to become too perfect, they would perform a ritual. They would not break a piece of it. They would simply pluck a single, specific thread, creating a small, deliberate imperfection in the grand tapestry. This discovery opens a door to a profound historical debate. To what extent did these powerful Eastern mystical traditions directly influence the secret doctrines of the Knights Templar? Scholars can trace the architectural and scientific knowledge the Crusaders brought back to Europe. But the transmission of secret religious ideas is far harder to prove. Was a Templar knight, sitting in a marketplace in Acre, initiated into this secret by a Sufi or Manichaean mystic? Or is this a case of parallel evolution, two different cultures, staring up at the same silent, star-filled sky, independently arriving at the same terrifying and sacred conclusion that perfection is a prison, and that freedom is only possible because something, somewhere, is broken? You look at the disk. The broken sixth arm now seems to be a void, a tiny, man-made black sun. The Templars, with their practical martial mindset, translated the concept into a mechanical device, a wheel that could be physically broken. But the underlying philosophy is the same. The fractured celestial harmony is not a uniquely Western idea. It is a human one, an ancient intuition that has surfaced in different forms across different cultures. This changes everything. The network of watchers you have been imagining might be far older and more widespread than you ever conceived. They might not all trace their lineage back to a Templar ship vanishing from La Rochelle. Some might trace it back to a hidden library in Alexandria, a mountaintop observatory in the Andes, or a silent monastery in the Himalayas. They are a global brotherhood of listeners, united not by a shared history, but by a shared sensitivity to to the same cosmic flaw. And the prophecy of 2039 is not just a European event. It is the focal point of a global, ancient tradition. The wheel is turning, and the entire world, whether it knows it or not, is turning with it. The idea of a global network, a silent brotherhood stretching from the Andes to the Himalayas, changes the scale of your search. The disc you hold is not the sole artifact. It cannot be. A tradition this old, this widespread, would have other tools, other relics, each with its own purpose in their grand, silent liturgy. You begin to search not just for texts, but for objects. You comb through obscure monastic inventories, auction house records, and museum archives, looking for items described with a particular kind of language, not holy or golden, but silent, sealed, or sleeping. Your search leads you to the Abbey of St. Gall in Switzerland, a bastion of Benedictine learning that survived the turmoil of the Reformation and the Napoleonic Wars. Its library is a world-renowned treasure trove of medieval manuscripts. But you are interested in its crypt. An entry in a 19th century librarian's private log, digitized only a few years ago, describes the rediscovery of an object that had been walled up in the crypt's foundation a generation earlier to protect it from Napoleon's armies. The log entry is brief and filled with a palpable sense of unease. It describes the object not as a saint's reliquary or a golden chalice, but as the speculum silens, the silent mirror. The description is chillingly precise. It was a large, perfectly circular disc of a substance that resembled polished black obsidian, but was unnaturally cold and dense. Its surface was flawless, without a single ripple or imperfection, but it did not reflect, or rather it did not reflect the world as it was. The librarian wrote that looking into it was like looking into a pool of still, black water at midnight. It showed no clear image, only a depthless, silent void that seemed to absorb the light, the sound, and even the warmth of the room. He notes that the monks who found it were deeply unsettled, and that the abbot ordered it to be immediately walled up again, in a new, unmarked location. The mirror was too dangerous to reveal, too sacred, or perhaps too profane to destroy. It was a relic that did not speak. You stare at the words on the screen, a new piece of the puzzle clicking into place with dreadful certainty. The disc and the mirror are counterparts. They are two halves of a single, functional apparatus. This is a concept that appears in the history of divination, from the Elizabethan Magus John Dee with his obsidian scrying mirror, to the ancient Greek oracles who gazed into bowls of water. Historians debate whether these were genuine attempts to see the future or simply psychological tools, objects of focus for meditation and intuition. But the Templars and the Watchers were not just meditating. They were practicing a form of celestial technology. The disc is the calculator. It is the intricate clockwork that points to the when, the precise moment of celestial alignment, the year 2039. But the mirror is the lens. It is the screen. It is the tool that shows the what. It is designed to be used only at the moment pinpointed by the disc, when the cosmic tumblers have clicked into their final, potent alignment. Looking into it at any other time would reveal nothing but a silent void. But at the appointed hour, activated by the resonant frequency of the prophecy, it would not just be a mirror, it would become a window. A wave of cold fear washes over you as you understand why the monks walled it away with such haste. The mirror is not a passive viewing screen. To use it, one would have to do more than just look. One would have to attune oneself to it, to project one's own consciousness into its silent, waiting depths. It is a tool that requires a human operator to complete the circuit. And in the wrong hands, or in the hands of someone unprepared for what they might see, the consequences would be catastrophic. It doesn't just show you the prophecy, it makes you a part of it. The watchers, you realize, are not just guarding a secret, they are guarding a weapon, or a tool so powerful it might as well be one. The disc is the key. The mirror is the door. And for 1,000 years, the silent watchers have ensured that the two never come together, especially not at the moment the lock is meant to turn. Your discovery of the disc has brought the key out into the light, and somewhere, sealed in the cold stone of an alpine crypt, the door is waiting. Of course, here is the existence of the silent mirror changes the equation completely. You are no longer dealing with a single, isolated mystery. You are dealing with a system, an apparatus of two parts designed to work in concert. The disc is the key. The mirror is the door. One calculates the moment, the other opens the window. The thought is as elegant as it is terrifying. The silent watchers were not just guarding a prophecy, they were guarding a technology, a set of instruments whose combined power was so great they had to be kept separated by geography, by secrecy, and by centuries of silence. With this new understanding, you return to your research, searching for any text that links these two concepts, a wheel of stars and a mirror of silence. You look for a bridge between the mechanical and the mystical. The search leads you back to the murky, poetic world of Gnostic and Manichaean texts, the same philosophical well from which the idea of the black sun emerged. And it is there, in a commentary on a lost gospel, that you find a single, cryptic line of verse. It is presented as a fragment of a much older chant, a piece of a forgotten liturgy. The line is simple, rhythmic, and it sends a cold, clear shock of recognition through you. It reads, "The sixth falls, the seventh closes." You stare at the phrase, letting its cadence settle in your mind. It is the sound of a lock turning. "The sixth falls" is a phrase you understand immediately. It is the breaking of the arm, the ritual sacrifice, the falling note in the celestial song that creates the necessary flaw, the silence, the wound in the heart of perfection that allows the universe to breathe. It is the story of the disc, the story of Eligius's eyewitness account, the story of the stutter you felt with your own hands. It is the first half of the ritual, the act that sets the stage. But the second half, the seventh closes. This is new. The disc has only 6 arms. The system, as you understood it, was based on the number 6. Where does the 7th element come from? It is not another piece of the machine. It is not another relic hidden in another crypt. You read the line again and again, and the answer rises in your mind with the slow, dawning horror of a truth that has been hiding in plain sight all along. The 7th element is not made of iron or obsidian. The 7th element is you. It is the observer, the human consciousness, the watcher. The system is not composed of 2 inanimate objects, but 3 parts: the disc, the calculator, the mirror, the lens, and the living mind, the operator. The machine is not fully assembled until a human being stands before it. Closes does not mean ends. It means closes the circuit. The human observer, by looking into the silent mirror at the precise moment indicated by the disc, becomes the final, living component. Their consciousness is the wire that connects the key to the door, the catalyst that makes the entire apparatus function. This is the ultimate secret of the Watchers. This is why the mirror is so dangerous. It's not just about the psychological shock of what one might see. It is about the metaphysical function one performs by seeing it. To look into the mirror at the appointed hour is not a passive act of observation. It is an act of participation, an act of creation. You don't just witness the prophecy, you complete it. You are the gear that locks the cosmic clock into its final, world-altering configuration. This idea has faint, distorted echoes in history. The practice of scrying, using reflective surfaces like mirrors, crystals, or bowls of water to gain hidden knowledge, is ancient and universal. Queen Elizabeth I's court astrologer John Dee famously used a polished obsidian mirror, now in the British Museum, to, as he claimed, communicate with angels. Historians debate whether men like Dee truly believed they were talking to otherworldly entities, or if these were simply tools for deep meditation, for unlocking the intuitive parts of their own minds. But the Watchers' belief system goes a step further. For them, the observer is not just unlocking their own mind. They are unlocking the world. The chant is a sequence of cosmic engineering. First, the sixth falls. The wheel is broken, creating a potential, a silence, a question. For 729 years, the universe hangs in this state of suspended animation. Then, at the appointed time, the seventh closes. A prepared, focused consciousness steps into the circuit, and the potential collapses into a single, irreversible reality. The chant speaks of a sequence: fracture, silence, and return. The return is not the return of a person or a god. It is the return of consequence. The moment the question posed by the broken arm receives its final, definitive answer. And the one who looks in the mirror is the one who gives it. Of course. Here is the revelation of the three-part system: disc, mirror, and observer is a terrifying, perfect trinity. It explains the scale of the prophecy, but it also creates a new, practical problem. If the entire apparatus only functions at the precise moment calculated by the disc, how does a watcher in 15th century Portugal or 18th century Peru know when that moment is? How does the network stay synchronized? They cannot all have access to a master calculator, a heavy iron disc hidden beneath a French chapel. A tradition so widespread and so dedicated to secrecy must have a more personal, portable way of keeping time. Your research shifts again, turning away from grand, institutional relics and toward the small, intimate objects that move through history in the pockets and on the fingers of individuals. You begin to scour family wills, dowry lists, and inventories of estates, looking for descriptions of unusual jewelry. You are not looking for diamonds or rubies, but for items described with the familiar language of the mystery: dark metal, unusual weight, a design of 6 spirals. It is a painstaking, tedious search through the mundane artifacts of human lives, a quest for a sacred object hidden amongst the silver spoons and mourning brooches. The clue comes from the estate inventory of a minor 18th century English diplomat who had spent years in the Ottoman Empire. His name was Alistair Finch, and among his listed possessions is an item that baffles the appraisers. It is listed simply as the Asham ring. The notes describe it as being of little intrinsic value, made of a dull, dark metal resembling pewter, but of a remarkable density. The description of the design makes your blood run cold. It is a small, circular signet, engraved not with a family crest, but with a curious pattern of 6 interlocking arms, one of which appears to be deliberately broken. The name Asham is a puzzle. It's not a known place or family name connected to Finch. It feels like a code word, a placeholder. You wonder if it's an anagram or perhaps a reference to a secret place or text, but the object itself is unmistakable. It is a miniature mute wheel, a version small enough to be worn, to be carried, to be hidden in plain sight. This was not just a symbol of membership, a secret handshake frozen in metal. You are certain it was a functional device. You theorize that the rings are connected to the master discs through a principle that ancient philosophers would have called sympathy. It's a concept that appears in various forms throughout history, from the sympathetic strings on a viola d'amore that vibrate without being touched, to the folk magic belief that a lock of hair can be used to affect the person it came from. The rings and the discs share the same fundamental geometric pattern, the same metaphysical DNA. They are tuned to the same cosmic frequency. The ring, you surmise, is a personal receiver, a celestial tuning fork. For its wearer, it would be a constant, subtle companion. Most of the time, it would be cold and inert. But as a significant date on the Great Wheel approached, or when one of the master discs was activated, the ring would respond. Perhaps it would hum with a faint, almost imperceptible vibration. Perhaps its temperature would drop by a few degrees, a sudden spot of cold against the warmth of the skin. It would be a silent alarm, an early warning system that only its wearer could feel. It would be a call to listen, a signal to turn one's attention to the great, silent ritual. This makes the network of watchers infinitely more resilient and more difficult to track. They are not connected by messages or meetings, but by a web of sympathetic resonance, a silent, invisible network of feeling. And the implications for your own situation are profound. When you first touched the disc in the pit, when you turned its dial and felt it stutter, you did not just awaken one object, you sent a ripple across the entire network. You rang a bell that was heard, faintly, by every ring-bearer across the globe. The feeling of being watched is no longer a vague paranoia. It is a certainty. Somewhere out there, a quiet historian, a reclusive astronomer, a patient archivist, has felt a sudden chill on their finger. They have felt the hum of their own personal relic change its tune. They do not know who you are or where you are, but they know that a major piece of the system, a master calculator, is awake and in play. And they are now listening, with an intensity you can barely imagine, for the next note in a song that has been silent for centuries. Of course, here is: the existence of the Asham ring solidifies the chilling reality of your situation. You are not alone in your knowledge. A silent, unseen network of watchers is now aware that one of the master keys has been found. The pressure to understand the full scope of the prophecy before they or someone else can intervene becomes an almost physical weight. You have the when, the year 2039. You have a glimpse of the what, the terrifying potential of the silent mirror. But a crucial piece is still missing from the puzzle: the where. Where is this celestial event meant to be observed? Where does the seventh, the human operator, need to be standing to close the circuit? Your research leads you to another forgotten scholar, a woman this time. Her name was Dr. Ilara Vance, a historian of cartography and navigation who taught at Oxford in the 1950s. She was a brilliant but marginalized figure, a woman in a field utterly dominated by men. Her work focused on the hidden knowledge embedded in medieval maps, arguing that the mappa mundi of the era were not just crude, faith-based representations of the world, but also sophisticated data storage devices, encoding everything from trade routes to astronomical data in their seemingly naive illustrations. She was largely ignored by the academic establishment of her time. In a posthumously published collection of her essays, you find a chapter dedicated to what she called geometric redaction in esoteric cartography. It is a study of how secret societies, from the Freemasons to the Rosicrucians, used symbols not just as emblems, but as maps. She argued that the precise angles, curves, and proportions of these symbols were not arbitrary or merely aesthetic. They were a form of geometric code, and her prime example, the one that makes you stop breathing, is a sigil she found sketched in the margins of a Templar-era navigational chart. It is a six-armed spiral, the mute wheel. Dr. Vance, with no knowledge of its ritual significance, approached it purely as a problem of navigation. She theorized that the sigil was a map of 6 locations on the Earth's surface. The key, she argued, was in the unit of measurement. The graceful, spiraling curves of the 5 unbroken arms were not just beautiful lines. Their length and curvature, when measured in arc minutes, the standard unit of celestial navigation, where 1 minute of latitude is equal to 1 nautical mile, encoded a precise set of geographical coordinates. You feel a dizzying sense of worlds colliding. The language of the heavens, arc minutes used to measure the position of stars, was being used to pinpoint locations on the Earth. It was a perfect fusion of the celestial and the terrestrial, a way of saying as above, so below, in the pure, undeniable language of mathematics. Following Vance's methodology, you begin the painstaking process of measuring the digital image of the disk. You translate the elegant curves of the 5 unbroken arms into numbers, into degrees of latitude and longitude. The coordinates resolve into 5 distinct points on the globe. They are not major cities or famous landmarks. They are remote, isolated, and geologically significant places. A specific windswept peak in the Andes, a small, uninhabited island in the North Atlantic, a valley deep within the Himalayas, known in local legend as a place where the gods descend. A point in the middle of the Sahara Desert, where a massive meteorite struck tens of thousands of years ago. And the 5th location, chillingly, is the volcanic caldera of Snæfellsjökull in Iceland, the very place Jules Verne chose as the fictional entrance to the center of the Earth. They are all places where the Earth's crust is thin, where its magnetic field is unusual, where the veil between the surface world and the deep telluric energies below feels porous. They are the ideal locations to observe, or perhaps to influence, the great turning of the wheel. But it is the 6th arm, the broken one, that holds the true secret. Dr. Vance noted in her essay that the break made it impossible to calculate the final set of coordinates. But she saw this not as a simple lack of information, but as a deliberate act of redaction. The most important location, the primary site, had been intentionally erased from the map. The breaking of the arm was not just a ritual to silence a song. It was an act of cartographic censorship, hiding the ultimate destination from all but the most initiated. The prophecy now has a geography. It is not an event that will happen everywhere, but a ritual that must be enacted at a specific network of sites. And the final, most sacred site remains a mystery. The disk is not just a clock. It is a map with a gaping hole in its center. The stutter you felt was not just a broken gear. It was the feeling of your finger tracing a road that leads off the edge of the known world. The ultimate question is no longer just what will happen in 2039, but where the final act is meant to take place. Of course. Here is the 5 coordinates lie scattered across your screen, a network of silent, sacred points spanning the globe. The Andes, the Sahara, the Himalayas, the North Atlantic, and Iceland. Each is a mystery in itself, but it is the last one that captures your imagination with an almost magnetic pull. Snæfellsjökull, the snow-covered stratovolcano on the western coast of Iceland. It is a place steeped in myth, a landscape that feels like it belongs more to saga than to modern geology. It was here that Jules Verne, in his classic novel, chose to place the entrance to a subterranean world. You always considered it a brilliant piece of literary fancy. Now you are not so sure. Was Verne, a man known for his meticulous research, tapping into a genuine, if hidden, tradition? You feel a pull to investigate this location further, but a trip to Iceland is impossible. Your resources are limited, and the feeling of being watched makes you reluctant to travel, to expose yourself. Your battlefield must remain the world of information. You begin to search for data related to Snæfellsjökull, not its tourist guides or climbing routes, but its deep science. You dive into geological surveys, seismic activity reports, and records of its magnetic field. The volcano is dormant, having last erupted nearly 1,800 years ago, but it is not dead. It is a sleeping giant, and like all sleeping things, it breathes. Your search leads you to a curious historical footnote: the Cold War. During the height of tensions between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, Iceland's strategic location in the North Atlantic made it a hotbed of covert surveillance. Both sides installed arrays of sensitive monitoring equipment, ostensibly to listen for nuclear submarines or secret weapons tests. One such station, a now decommissioned NATO listening post, was located near the base of Snæfellsjökull. Its primary purpose was hydroacoustic, listening to the ocean, but it also included highly sensitive seismometers and infrasound detectors to monitor the air and the earth. Most of the data from these stations remains classified, but you find a small, obscure academic study from the 1970s, written by a geophysicist who was granted limited access to the station's archives. He was studying ambient geological noise, the low-level hum of the planet. His paper notes a persistent anomaly in the data from the Snæfellsjökull station, a steady, ultra-low-frequency sound, a vibration just at the lowest threshold of the equipment's range, seemed to be emanating from deep within the volcano's magma chamber. The scientist dismisses it as a probable equipment malfunction or a resonance from a nearby geothermal plant, but he gives it a poetic, memorable name in his notes. He calls it Snæfell's Hollow Song. The phrase strikes you like a chord, a hollow song, a sound that is defined by its emptiness. You manage to track down the raw data from the geophysicist's study, archived on a forgotten university server. It is a string of numbers, a record of vibrations. You are not a seismologist, but you can convert the data into a visual waveform, a picture of the sound. On your screen, a line appears, a jagged, rhythmic pulse. It is not random noise. There's a pattern, a repeating structure, a cadence, a stutter. It is the same rhythmic imperfection you felt when you turn the disc. Your hands tremble as you work. The sound is a message. The earth itself is speaking, and it is speaking the language of the broken wheel. You isolate one full cycle of the song, a single pulse of the vibration. Using signal analysis software, you break it down into its constituent frequencies. It is not a single note, but a complex chord made of 6 distinct frequency bands. 5 of them are clean, harmonic, and stable. The 6th is distorted, wavering, and weak. It is the sound of a broken harmony. This is the key. This is the clue left by the watchers. They did not write down the location of the 6th site. They did not need to. They encoded it into the very resonance of the earth itself, at a location they knew was a powerful natural amplifier. The broken arm of the disc was designed to resonate with this specific geological hum. The stutter in the machine is a sympathetic echo of the song in the mountain. With a dawning sense of awe, you realize what you must do. You treat the 6 frequencies of the hollow song as a new set of data. You apply the same logic that Dr. Vance used for the sigil, translating the mathematical values of the frequencies back into the language of arc minutes and celestial geometry. 5 of the numbers give you coordinates you already know, confirming the locations in the Andes, the Sahara, and the others. They confirm the system is working. Then, with a deep breath, you translate the 6th frequency, the distorted one, the broken one. A new set of coordinates resolves on your screen, a single point on the globe. It is not a mountain or a desert or an island. It is a place that has been, for centuries, synonymous with secrets, power, and a silence of a different kind. A place built on a swamp, a city of whispers, a library of shadows. The Vatican, of course. Here is the Vatican. The name hangs in the air, a single word that reorients the entire map of your understanding. It is the last place you would have expected, and the only place that makes perfect, terrifying sense. The final coordinate does not point to a remote geological anomaly, but to the very heart of the institution that destroyed the Knights Templar. The conflict was not just over land, wealth, or political power. It was over this. It was over the control of the machine. You begin to see the Templars not as the medieval world saw them, but as they must have seen themselves. You think of the ancient Greek concept of musica universalis, the music of the spheres. It was a philosophical belief, held by thinkers from Pythagoras to Plato, that the mathematical relationships between the orbits of the sun, moon, and planets created a form of music. This music was not audible to the human ear. It was a divine celestial harmony, a proof of the perfection of God's creation. For centuries, this was a beautiful metaphor, a subject for poets and theologians. But the Templars, you now realize, did not see it as a metaphor. They saw it as a literal, physical reality. Through their contact with the advanced astronomical and mathematical knowledge of the Islamic and Byzantine worlds, they had moved beyond philosophy into applied science. To them, the sky was not a mystery to be worshipped. It was a machine to be understood, a vast, intricate clockwork of gears, resonances, and interlocking forces. And if it was a machine, it could be measured, it could be mapped, and most importantly, it could be maintained. This is the secret that separates them from the rest of their world. the heresy far more profound than any of the trumped-up charges leveled against them by King Philip's inquisitors. The Church taught that the cosmos was a divine, unchanging hierarchy, with God at its pinnacle and humanity in its designated place below. Man's role was to obey, to have faith, to accept the divine plan. But the Templars, with the mute wheel in their possession, held a different, far more dangerous belief. They believed the divine plan was a mechanism, and that humanity's role, or at least the role of their silent order, was to be its mechanic. Their rituals, their silent listening, their obsessive tracking of the heavens, it was not worship, it was diagnostics. They were the celestial engineers of the medieval world, listening to the hum of the great machine, checking for stress fractures, for worn-out gears. The breaking of the sixth arm was not an act of sacrilege. It was a necessary act of maintenance. It was the deliberate, calculated interruption of a system that, if left to run its perfect course, would lead to a conclusion so powerful, so absolute, that it would shatter the flawed vessel of the human world. They were not preventing a revelation in the religious sense. They were preventing a catastrophic system failure. This casts their entire history in a new light. Historians have long debated the reasons for the Vatican's sudden, brutal suppression of the order. The official story points to King Philip of France, deeply in debt to the Templars and jealous of their power, pressuring a weak pope, Clement IV. But what if the pope's motives were not just political? What if the Church had gotten wind of the Templars' true secret? What if they learned that the knights they had created to defend the faith had discovered a technology that allowed them to interfere with the divine clockwork of God Himself? This would be a heresy beyond all others, not a denial of God, but a claim to His toolbox. The Vatican could not tolerate such a rival power. The destruction of the Templars was not just a greedy land grab. It was a desperate attempt to seize or destroy this terrifying celestial technology. The Vatican wanted the key. They wanted the mute wheel. They wanted to be the sole arbiters of the cosmic machine. You look at the disc on your table, this heavy piece of dark iron. It is the physical proof of this lost science. It is the master tool of the celestial mechanic. The Templars failed to protect their order, but they succeeded in protecting their secret. They scattered their relics, hid their knowledge, and allowed their tradition to dissolve into the shadows, becoming the silent watchers. They lost the war, but they hid the prize. And the final coordinate, the location of the ultimate ritual site, points directly to the seat of their ancient enemy. It is an act of supreme, defiant irony. The key to controlling the machine is located in the one place its would-be masters would never think to look, right under their own feet. The revelation of the Vatican as the sixth and final site lands with the force of a physical blow. The puzzle is complete, its pieces clicking into place to form a picture of breathtaking, terrifying scope. The disc on your table is no longer a relic of a forgotten faith or a map to a lost treasure. Its function is far more direct, its purpose far more profound. The sigil is a clock. It is not a metaphor for time, not a symbol of eternity, but a literal, mechanical, functioning timepiece. And you know with a certainty that settles deep in your bones, exactly when that clock started ticking. It began in the autumn of 1307. It began in the moment the last free Grand Master of the Knights Templar, Jacques de Molay, realized the scale of King Philip's betrayal. It began when the order was shattered, when the guardians of the mute wheel were scattered to the winds. The breaking of the order was the breaking of the primary seal. The countdown did not begin with the discovery of the disk. It began with the fall of its masters. The 729-year cycle of peace that Eligius described was not just a period of watchful waiting. It was the slow, inexorable unwinding of a celestial mainspring. This is the great secret that separates the worldview of the Watchers from that of the modern era. We see time as an abstract concept, a river flowing in one direction. We measure it, we manage it, but we do not feel its substance. To the Watchers, time is a physical force, a resonant frequency, a tangible mechanism. The universe is the clock, and the disk is the key that winds it. This belief has its faint echoes in history. The late Middle Ages saw the rise of magnificent astronomical clocks in cities like Prague and Strasbourg. They were marvels of engineering, public spectacles that displayed the movements of the sun, moon, and planets. They were a celebration of divine order, made mechanical. But they were just displays. They were symbols. The disk is the real thing. It doesn't just show you the time. It is the time, coiled into a circle of dark, cold iron. The prophecy of 2039 is not a prediction of a future event. It is the alarm. It is the moment the clock, set ticking 7 centuries ago, is scheduled to chime. Every event you have uncovered, the breaking of the arm, the scattering of the Watchers, the hiding of the mirror, has been an attempt to muffle that chime, to delay the wake-up call, to prevent the world from having to face the morning. The Watchers have been fighting a desperate 700-year battle against their own alarm clock. You look at the disk, and you can almost hear it. A slow, steady, silent tick-tock that has been counting down the seconds of empires, the minutes of revolutions, the hours of world wars. It has measured the lives of every person who has lived and died since the 14th century. It sat in the dark earth beneath the chapel, not sleeping, but patiently counting. Its silence was not the silence of inertia. It was the silence of a bomb. Your role in this has become terrifyingly clear. You are not just a historian who has stumbled upon a secret. You are the person who has walked into the room just as the final grains of sand are about to fall through the hourglass. You are the one who has found the clock just before it strikes the final hour. The responsibility is crushing. The knowledge you hold is not a passive collection of facts. It is an active, ticking burden. The Watchers, wherever they are not just hunting for a relic. They are racing to find the clock before it goes off. And now, so are you. The question is no longer just about understanding the past. It is about surviving the future that the past has so meticulously built. Of course. Let us complete our journey for tonight. Here is the final section. You sit in the profound stillness of the late hour, the world outside your window reduced to a tapestry of dark fields and a faint dusting of stars. The journey is complete. The lines have been drawn from a dusty French chapel to the heart of the Vatican, from a 12th century monk to a 21st century prophecy. The disk on your table is the nexus of it all, a silent, sleeping singularity that has pulled your entire world into its orbit. The weight of the knowledge is immense, a physical pressure in the quiet room. You hold the when, the what, and the where. You hold the key, the map to the door, and the terrible understanding of what it means to be the one who turns the lock. For a long time, you do nothing. You simply look at the disk, its dark form a pool of shadow in the soft lamplight. The frantic energy of the chase, the intellectual fever of the hunt has finally broken. It leaves behind a calm that is vast, deep, and unnervingly clear. You are no longer an archaeologist. You are no longer a historian. Those titles feel like clothes you were wearing long ago, clothes that belong to a different person. You have become what you studied. By listening so intently to the silence, you have learned its language. By tracing the edges of the Watcher's world, you have found yourself standing at its center. The disc on the table does not seem like a threat anymore. It does not feel like a bomb waiting to explode. It feels patient. It has kept its secrets for a millennium. It can wait one more night. The hum has softened, or perhaps you have simply grown used to its frequency, its rhythm merging with the beating of your own heart. The great, complex machine of the cosmos, with its turning wheels and silent prophecies, fades into a distant, gentle hum. The immediate reality is this room, this silence, this moment of quiet contemplation before a future that is still, for a few more years, unwritten. The questions will still be there in the morning. The watchers will still be listening. The mirror will still be dreaming in its cold stone crypt. The year 2039 will still be waiting on the horizon, drawing closer with every turn of the earth. But for now, the work is done. The story has been told. The path has been walked, from the dust beneath a forgotten altar to the edge of a choice that could reshape the world. You have walked far enough for one night. It is time to let the silence hold you, to let the weight of what you know settle into a place of quiet strength rather than frantic fear. It is time to rest. Let the disc sleep beneath its soft cloth. Let the mirror dream in its cold, silent vault. The wheel will keep turning, whether you watch it or not. Sleep now. You have earned the peace of this small, quiet hour.